Just had a great conversation with Alana Winnick, who is the author of the new book, The Generative Age, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Education. And one of the things we kept coming back to was that, yes, we have access to artificial intelligence, things like ChatGPT, and so many other things that we actually didn't know that we are using that are actually considered to be artificial intelligence. And that's great, but we still have to focus on developing wisdom and our humanity in education. And it made me think of a post that I wrote recently where I refer back to an article that I wrote all the way back in 2014. And here's what I said. So with all the talk of technology, we just need to remember that there's so much more to schools, and some of the best things in 20th century education are just as relevant today. If you're a school that does not focus on building relationships, you are on a faster road to relevance than one that doesn't use technology. In a world where information is easy to access, I can always find better content online than I can in school. The refocus on relationships is more crucial now than ever. Embrace technology. It will provide people with opportunities that we could not have dreamed of when we were kids. But just remember that people will always be the most important part of the education system. As soon as we reduce everyone to a number or an avatar, we have lost more than we could have ever gained. And that's something we kept coming back to in the conversation was, how do we keep that humanness? How do we keep that, in this time where we're just inundated with change, inundated with information? And Alana gives a lot of great ideas. And one of the things that we talked about was the importance of wisdom. And I refer back to one more quote that I shared in this piece that I wrote. And in a time where information is abundant, we need to focus more on developing wisdom rather than simply garnering knowledge. The latter is imperative to gain the former, but it is not guaranteed. So that wisdom that we develop and how we utilize these things and how we actually use these things to make our world better than it was when we were kids. Alana gives some great ideas, some great insights on this. I really enjoyed the conversation. I know you will too. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovator's Mindset podcast. Hey everyone, this is George Couros. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovator's Mindset podcast. I am so blessed to have Alana Winnick here today. She is the EdTech Director of Pocanico. It has a T in there somewhere, but I don't know where it is. So I'm probably saying it wrong. So Alana.
Oh, good. Pocanico. Great job. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So Alana is the author of the new book, The Generative Age, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Education. It's actually published by Connected Ed Books. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, led by my very good friend, Jimmy Casas. And Alana, I saw a lot of the work that you're doing with artificial intelligence with your school district. So I asked you to be on here, and it's been wonderful getting to know you. But if you can just kind of tell everyone who you are, what you do today, and how you got there, I think it's a great place to start.
Okay. So my background is in childhood education. And I was in AIS math for 1 year and then inclusion kindergarten my second year. And then it was a very tough time to find a job. So I took a job as a computer lab teaching assistant, and just to have, health insurance and stuff. And very quickly, which now I know you know him, Adam Pease was the high school principal. He was like, whoa, this girl is going to leave the second she gets a job somewhere else. So they created a job as an educational technology specialist. So thank you, Adam, for probably facilitating that. And I worked there with Adam for 2 years, who's an incredible mentor and human. And then I got a job working for New York State and supporting 48 school districts around Rockland, Westchester, and Putnam. And then those are counties in New York, just north of Manhattan, in case you're not familiar, if your listeners aren't familiar. And then during the pandemic, one of the districts I was supporting was like, we can't share you anymore. We kind of just need you full time. This is a lot going on and we need you. So I came over to work with them as their educational technology director and data protection officer. And while we're on the topic of the pandemic, I just think that this is something that I found so fascinating in my career. That when the pandemic happened, I don't even want to say it brought us forward to the future. I think it brought us where we should have been. This is where we should have been in 2020. And I was so excited about it because it's all things I had been hoping that people would do for a very, very long time. And then when things kind of got back to normal, people went back to the way they've did things before. And I was
Mhm.
not excited about that. I'm not saying in my own district. I mean, I think that across the board, a lot of people went back to the way things were have been done instead of innovating and moving forward, which I thought this would have helped everyone that already had that foundation to move forward. But then when AI came out, I think and I hope that AI will push us to where we went in the beginning with the
Right.
pandemic, but even further and force us to not go back to the way things used to be. So when that's how I wrote the book so fast, because for me, it wasn't about AI really. It's about this where education should be in 2023 and beyond.
Right.
And that's why it was written. So because it wasn't about AI, it's about where we should be in
So
20.
what? So why do you? Okay. So what do you? Why do you think? Why do you think maybe people went back? And this is something I've been talking about for quite a while. Is that, um, are we really desperately trying to get back to 2019? Like, is that the goal, the emphasis of what we're doing in education right now? And the weird thing is, I think that the thing that I always encourage educators to think about is like, what does 2023, 2024 look like? And probably it should be more aligned with what you envision education to be when you first actually enter the profession. Like somehow, like we have hopes and aspirations of when we enter, and then I feel through the process of education, through the work that we actually do, it kind of wears us down, and we just kind of, we tend to check boxes, but it's partly because people make us check the boxes, right?
Right.
So why do you think that people, because I think a lot of times we blame people for going back to that, but is our school districts and our systems maybe pushing them to that? Or like, why do you think people are kind of maybe going back to what it was prior to COVID?
I mean, I think some teachers are like, I don't want to look at another Zoom or Teams ever again. I
Yeah,
don't want to look at my computer. I just want to put it down. Like, I think they were a bit traumatized
that's fair.
from the experience, and they're just like, paper books, paper, pens, crayons. Let's put the technology away. And I think maybe once the dust settles, they'll pick
Hmm.
it back up. I hope. But I think maybe it was a bit of just feeling a sense of normalcy and being traumatized from the pandemic.
Yeah, and
I
I was actually it's weird because I was using StreamYard to do these podcasts, and then I started using Zoom. Just StreamYard wasn't working great for me for whatever reason, and I started going back to Zoom. But about 2 or 3 weeks earlier, someone asked me to meet with them, and it was on Zoom. And I hadn't used it in a little while, and I was like, "Oh, like things have changed a little bit." And I'm not gonna lie to you. I said to them, "I'm like, I'm so happy that I'm not comfortable using Zoom because I haven't used it in a while." Whereas you just knew it like inside out
yeah,
for a while,
yeah,
and I was like, I kind of like that I haven't been using this as much. So when you say that people were traumatized by it, I get it. Like there's times where I'm like, oh my god, I can't get it, get on Zoom. I remember this, and people, at the time, it was like interesting because there's like, hey, everyone has to have their camera on and all this other stuff. And I remember this one morning I was doing an event with superintendents, and I would have never said this, but the person who brought me in said, hey, we want you to show respect to the speaker today. We want you to all keep your cameras on for the entire time. And there was a superintendent, I'm not even lying. This is Sunday morning. So he had me on his treadmill, and I just saw him like striding for an hour. I'm like, dude, turn the camera off. Like, I don't want to see this. Right. And I have no problem with the guy on the
yeah,
treadmill. I just don't want to watch it for an hour.
yeah.
Right. And so, he was actively listening to everything I was saying, but also it was kind of throwing me off because I'm just seeing these high strides go as we go. I think part of this too, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. I kind of struggle because I've been writing forever, and I've struggled a little bit when you're thinking about AI is like, well, why should I even write anymore? Because AI can do this and do it way better than me. And it almost like,
Not
but
really.
do you know what I mean? Like I felt that a little bit because you're just seeing it like,
Yeah.
and so how does someone get over that maybe, and I feel like, okay, that means I really got to focus on the stuff that only I can share, that AI can't share, that's, somewhat personal. And I think you and I talked about in the last podcast, that really human connection.
Yeah.
How do you kind of get people to understand that in a different way when you have access to this stuff? How does it change, our thinking so that we continue doing stuff that pushes our own learning?
I think they just have to use it.
Right.
And once they try and use it, they're like, "Oh, that's really good. Oh, that's not so good. Oh, that's good." And then I think when you just see it, you realize, "Okay, this is a really good start, but I can make it better."
Mhm.
And I think it's really just about using it. I know that with my own teachers. So with AI, it's so funny because they don't know I wrote a book. Some of them do because
Right.
I asked some of them to read it first, but a lot of them don't know that I wrote a book, and it's ironic that I'm like I guess AI expert and
Right.
right in front of them. But I try to empower them to be leaders. Like I don't want to stand up at a faculty meeting and them hear me all the time. So
Right.
I know, like, okay, Marina's doing this really great thing, Catel's doing this really great thing, and Emma's doing this really great thing. And I'll have a faculty meeting and like do station rotations, and the teachers cycle through 10 minutes in each room and see what their colleagues are doing really great. And then it's not me doing it, but
Right.
also they're sharing, hey, I did this. This is what worked. This didn't work. And now the last 3 minutes, you try it. And so they're walking out of each of those 3 rooms, trying something and saying, okay, this worked, this didn't work. And I think until you put it in their hands and ask them to do it, no one will notice or see it.
So I'm curious about what your thinking is on this, because I love that you're giving people opportunity and time to utilize it themselves, because this is something I've been arguing forever, is that too often what we do is we jump straight to the teaching without doing the learning. Like we just say, like, how do we get kids to use this? And it's like, well, you're not even using this. So how do you, if you don't understand it from the viewpoint of a learner, you're going to struggle with this. But this is actually very specifically in the New York area when ChatGPT like was all over the place in probably December, maybe even as early as November 2022. By January, I saw tons of districts in New York, not the state specifically,
New York City.
blocking it. Right.
And yeah, all of
And
New York City is like the largest school district in the country. They
yeah.
block.
So like, I guess not, how do you get people to kind of see past this? Because I know my brother Alec, his big thing is really how do you utilize this? Because a lot of people are concerned about cheating. Is like, you shouldn't be concerned about cheating. You should be more focused on how does this actually take changing or teaching? Like
Yeah,
that should be the big focus. So, if you're going to block it right away, then people can still get on their phones. Like it's not like you
I
can't have
know.
access to it. So
I
like, how
know.
are you getting people like to kind of shift their thinking on this to go beyond? The one of the best analogies I heard about it is that use it as a second brain, like to kind of see
Oh,
that. So
yeah.
how are you helping that shift? Kind of so that schools aren't blocking it. And I know you're doing this work already in your school district, but I know you're working with other schools and districts around the world and having conversations. How are you getting them to kind of wrap their heads around it?
I think the first part of what I always say is, and I don't like to use the word assessment, I really don't. But when you talk about assessment, if you are assessing the end product, let's call it an essay. That's a really easy example because AI could do that. If you're assessing the end product, AI can just do that. So I think what we need to really the area that we really need to think about is assessing the learning process. If you are checking in with your students, watching the learning evolve and guiding them throughout their learning process, and you could use project-based learning or flipped classroom, or I mean any of the things we know work, you wouldn't be really concerned about cheating because
Right.
you're watching the learning and you're watching that student develop and learn and grow. How are students learning and how are you assessing learning? Because if you're assessing learning, you shouldn't be concerned.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with AI detection. Like first of all, they don't have a very high accuracy rate, and they actually OpenAI, they discontinued their AI detector.
Mm-hmm.
But all AI really is putting the next most probable word and the next most probable word and the next most probable word. So it's only detecting the probability of the words strung together. So if you replace words with synonyms, an AI detector won't even
Right.
detect that. So I
Yeah.
think yeah.
like even on the so on my own podcast, I'll do these book reviews, right? And one of the things, and I'm trying to make my process of learning very visible. So I'll say like, hey, here's a book I read. Here's what I liked about it, and I'm gonna give you a short summary based on what ChatGPT wrote for me.
Right.
So I actually outright reference ChatGPT, and the way I go through it is I don't say like write a summary of this book. I'll say write a 5 tweet summary of this book.
Oh
So it's
wow.
very concise in the way that, because
I
it's a
think it's not
podcast, right?
called a tweet if it's called X and not
Yeah.
Twitter now.
Well,
I don't
ChatGPT knows, maybe
I
they'll
don't
correct me the
know.
next time I do that. But I think part of it is using the process,
Yeah.
and then actually saying, okay, now here's my takeaways from the book. But they're very like, there's no way ChatGPT could actually write the parts that are very George specific. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, here's
Yeah.
a quote, here's what it means to me, and here's something that I've seen in education and how it relates. And I think making that process learning, and when you talked about that idea of assessment, I remember actually doing this project, and we were talking about other countries, and the students were making videos, right? Making
Right.
videos explaining this, and it was new to the teacher. And I remember the teacher saying to me, well, how do I assess the video? I'm like, you don't assess the video. You assess the kids' understanding of the country and what they're asked in the curriculum. So
Yeah.
basically, I'm old enough that I used to get doc marks for my grammar in science. I'm like, and now I know that's actually not the correct thing to do. Now, could you help me with my language in science? But are you assessing my grammar based on your own judgment, or are you assessing my understanding of the curriculum objectives, the things that you're supposed to be talking in the science? And I think
Right.
that's something that you kind of alluded to, is that really kind of, are you looking at the learning, or are you just looking at the tool? Are you looking at the thing, right? And so
Yeah.
I think if you don't, I think the more you say don't use it, the more people want to use it, and
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
students.
No, that someone else recently said that the more you say don't use it, the more they want to use it. And I think that there's like a time and place for using it.
Yeah.
And I also, so I like to talk to kids about this a lot. I was talking to a ninth grader, and she was saying she's been using this thing called Quillbot, which basically is AI, but she
Yep.
didn't know that it was AI since sixth grade. So she's been using it for 3 years before ChatGPT was ever a
Right.
thing. And she said, oh, I just take my writing, I plug it in, and then um what she said is that it helps her see how someone else would have written the same thing in a different way. And she thinks it actually helps her become a
Right.
better writer. So I think if you think about it like that, and that's what I did. I mean, when I wrote my book, first of all, I think if you're writing a book in 2023 in a world with AI, like you should absolutely be using it as a thought partner.
Right.
Um, because I came up with a list, and John Spencer said this, and he came up with a list, and you throw it in, and then it gives you maybe things you don't like, but one idea you didn't think of before, and
Right.
then you rewrite it in your own kind of way. So I reference it as his AJ Giuliani, his like co-author for his recent book. So I think it helps you bounce ideas, and you take what resonates with you. Um, Richard Collada gave me this idea. I stole this one from him. So he had said, he's CEO of ISI, he said, it's like you're a curator, and his wife is a musician, and there's only like however many musical notes, and you like pick and choose like in like an artist, right? Like you're curating the ideas. When I was in Greece, I actually met this DJ, and I
Hmm.
wasn't at a DJ party. I was just like in the Plaka. I was at Plaka.
Yeah.
We met a DJ, and I decided it's a more kid-friendly term if you call it like you're like a DJ, right? And they pick and choose the beats and the music that resonate with you, and you build your own thing. But as long as it's reflecting your own knowledge and your own thinking, and it sounds like you, then it helps you become a better writer.
One of the examples that you gave I thought was really, really powerful, is kind of using as a thought partner. And there's like my blog, there's like before Grammarly and after Grammarly,
Yeah, that's
right?
AI.
And sometimes what I'll do, I actually go back and I pull old posts, and then I do what's called a blog revisit. So I'll say like, hey, here's something I wrote in 2011. And then I say I gave it the Grammarly treatment to like correct it. And like I see it, I'm like, oh my God, like there's so much
Yeah.
red and there's so many things. But as you said, through that process, when you're kind of doing Grammarly, it actually has helped me write because I'm like, oh, I keep doing this, I keep doing
Right.
this thing, right? And so I didn't realize it, and I feel sometimes, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's like I'm like playing this game with Grammarly to have the least amount of like wrong sentences in that right now because I'm like, oh
But that's
God,
making
like
you a stronger writer.
totally, totally,
So
yeah.
did you
It's like
watch
spell
the
check, right? Spell checking like helps
yeah.
me to spell some words that I've never spelled before. Like I think the word. So let's see. Let's do a spelling test. How do you spell the word gist?
Oh God.
Right? Is it G or like I
I
know
now that I'm on the spot, I don't know. But if I was writing it, I think I might.
is it G or J? Right? So I actually
Yeah.
I wrote that in my blog today, and I was like, okay, did I do it right? So I think
That's
it's
why
good.
dictation is great. You don't need to worry.
Right. And so like the gist, yeah. So it is G. And that's actually oh maybe it's totally wrong because gist is actually a type of cancer that begins in the digestive system. It's a gastrointestinal tumor. So maybe I use that in a totally wrong way today. So there you go. And I found that out really, really quick. So maybe
Yeah.
I did write it wrong, right? But I think part of it too is actually understanding, the different ways you can use this and actually how we can utilize it to improve our learning. And my big thing is there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? And I think that AI is really good at providing knowledge, but you have to create wisdom. Like
Mhm.
that's a very human thing. All right, I'm going to read this little synopsis from your book that's written on Amazon here. Prepare schools and classrooms for the AI-driven world of tomorrow. The generative age, artificial intelligence, and the future of education is more than just an exploration of AI's impact on education. It is also a call to action. Educators are uniquely positioned to shape the future of learning and ensure that AI is harnessed responsibly. The generative age is an essential read for educators and leaders looking to harness the potential of generative AI in shaping the future of education. Okay, first of all, when you say generative, what does that mean? What do you
Oh,
mean
thank you
generative
for bringing that up. So generative age is different than generative AI is
AI?
different than AI because it's generating content. The content could be text, the content could be images, it could be video, it could be audio. I've been using the AI one, the AI image generating one a lot in lessons. So like our French students are writing a description of a human of a face in French, and we pop it in the AI generator to see if their French writing accurately depicted what they were visioning in their head. So and a million other things like algorithmic writing in third grade. But anyway, so generative means the AI is generating content instead of just other AIs. Like your car has AI in it. It's
Right?
not like you're not getting any content out of it yourself. So that's what generative means, is it's generating content. Um, but while you were talking, I just thought about something. So if you haven't checked out the Sal Khan TED Talk, the
Right.
first few minutes are so powerful. And I think that I added it into my book too. It helps you understand how AI could be your personal, like, like tutor. And I think that that's how you're using it in your blog writing and using in educators will use it as their tutor and their teaching assistant, and learners will use it as their tutor. And I think that's how it will be used to help. Because actually Bloom, Benjamin
Mhm.
Bloom, probably studied him. We probably all studied him. He had a study that said that was called the 2 sigma problem. And if everyone had a personal one-on-one tutor, they're like a good student would become great and a below average student would become like a really good student. But we just never had the money to give every child a tutor. But this is actually an opportunity for everyone to have their own personal tutor.
Hey, so like when you're talking about this, in the Sal Khan thing, it's kind of interesting because I don't know if you remember this, but Sal Khan was going to be the end of education. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
So
I did.
what was it, Khan Academy? And I remember when Khan Academy was everywhere, people were saying, "Hey, like, oh, this is like the end, and all now they're just going to replace teachers with YouTube and these videos and stuff like this." And I'm gonna be honest with you, when that all happened, uh, I actually was like, I'm not worried because I don't teach that way. Like the way that
Yeah.
a Khan Academy first came out, I'm like, if that's the way you teach, then maybe you should be replaced, right? If it's just like this part of it too. Now, even thinking about Khan Academy and that thinking, could you use Khan Academy as a supplement? 100%, right? But it wasn't meant to be a replacement. And so that was never something that I was actually ever concerned about with that process. And so one of the things that you say, and it's the last question I'm going to ask you, you say this is a call to action. And so when you say that call to action, what is the call to action? Like, what are you hoping this book generates, this book is going to do for people? How do you think it's going to help?
Well, I have this one section. Well, I have a passport to success, like a student's passport to success.
There you go.
But I also have this one section I really love that's called asking difficult questions and having difficult conversations. And I really envisioned that this would have been read by like teams of people,
Right.
and like your department or your school, like sitting down together and having these conversations about what do you think the future of your classroom and your school and your district and education looks like? Like what does the role of a teacher look like?
Right.
What does it mean to be an educated person? Those are just ones that came to my head, but there's like, that's what I mean. Like, let's come together, let's have these deep conversations, and let's change the way that we've been teaching to a way that we know works. Not like I'm not suggesting anything that we don't know works.
Well, so one of the conversations I've been having with people, and it's kind of what you're talking about, because you are not defining that. You're asking people to consider it, right?
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I've been asking people is, what are the basics in education? Like when we say, because people still say the basics. And I think it's really important that we actually have a conversation with that. So I'll give you an example of this. So 2020 happens. We talked about this, how people were kind of forced to a change. So a lot of people still would say cursive handwriting is a basic skill every kid needs to know. And I'm not going to make the argument against it, because like I'll tell you, people like with cursive, that's
I know.
a touchy subject, right?
Very sensitive.
Very sensitive. So I'm not saying that, but some of the people who know how to write cursive and are very good at it don't know how to get onto Zoom.
Right.
So is getting onto Zoom, using some of the stuff, a basic skill? And I'm not saying it is. I'm saying have the conversation. And I think it's really important to actually say, and I think that's what you're asking for too, we should be having these conversations instead of dismissing this. And I think this is what was really interesting. And, you kind of talked about this, is that COVID kind of pushed people to a certain space where you had to adapt really quickly.
Yeah.
But then, ChatGPT, it isn't necessarily pushing people to do it. It's kind of optional. And you can see why school districts, and my first thought is like, have we not learned anything? Like, have we not like picked up anything? Because if we don't, like, this is going to be, you might not have to do it. It might not be mandatory, but it's going to be thrust on you at some point, and then we are going to be trying to catch up. And so we're always kind of trying to play this game of catch up. And I understand, like, because a lot of times teachers want to do something, but their school districts or their leadership teams are holding them back,
right,
and not letting them do this because
they caught on TikTok, right? They watched a TikTok about it.
Right. Yeah. Because a lot of times it's just like they're pushing people away from this, and and then pretending it doesn't exist. And I think if you pretend it doesn't exist, it's only going to get worse. I think it's how you realize this too. So
no, I think, and that's when you go back to your 3 questions, and like you ask the 3 questions, they're very important, because there's a teacher and there's a leader, and the teacher, everyone needs to be on the same page or change can't happen. You can't make change without having these conversations and being like and having support. Really, like it comes down to having like a supportive community.
Yeah, so I don't know if you ever saw me post about this. This is probably dating me. Do you remember New Coke? Do you remember this?
No.
Okay, so there's Coke forever, like just Coke. No, I'm not talking. So there used to be, actually, I can't probably say this because I'm on YouTube, but there was like Coke and Coke, like way back, like early, like we're talking like 1908 or something like this, right?
I've heard.
But then there was like the same formula for Coke forever. And then I can't remember the year. It's like around 85, 88, something like this. But they came out with New Coke. And basically what they did, they were changing this formula that had been forever. And they did these taste tests for New Coke. And overwhelmingly, people in these taste tests, picked New Coke. And so they're like, all right, well, this is a no-brainer. Like, people like this. And so they just said, hey, we got a new Coke formula. And people were livid because they didn't care that it tasted better. They had an emotional connection to the
Um,
way Coke tasted.
hmm,
So what happened was they like stocks dropped. People are like, there's like this huge backlash. And I like it. Then there was like new Coke and Coke Classic. And now I think just Coke is Coke. And some people actually think it was like a marketing scam, like
yeah.
to bring more attention to Coke and things like this too. That it was really important to kind of understand that there's that people don't, even if something is better, if you are connected to the old thing emotionally, it doesn't matter. So like we have to kind of bridge that connection emotionally to this. And I think that's why, your book's really important, is because you and I were talking about this before. This is not something that is like, hey, I wrote it and it's already irrelevant because I'm showing you step by step AI, but getting people to understand this in a different
Yeah.
way. Would you say
And I
that's
think
fair? Like,
buy-in is so important. Like going back to that Coke thing, buy-in is so important. It's you're not going to make change without buy-in. And I think I actually found AI to be really easy to get people on board in my own school district
right,
because you're just like, look how much time you just saved. You walked out of here
right.
and everyone had this aha moment of, look how much time I can save. Now, no one's going to, if I said I'm going to block AI for teachers, they would freak out. So I think it was
Right.
actually the easiest things for me to get buy-in about.
Well, see, and what you did, very smart, the emotional connection. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I've got time. There's many things I want to do. So
Yeah.
this can save me time. I could have more time at home, more time with family, more time with my friends, more time with people I care about. So there is that connection to that. So Alana, first of all, congratulations on the book. Thanks for
Yeah.
taking time out of a Saturday to record this podcast. I'm looking forward to learning from you more. And you can follow Alana. You can see all her socials down in the description below, and check out the new book, The Generative Age, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Education. And shout out to Pocanico. I wanted to say it one more time, right? So I'm going to give myself a self air horn for, did I say it right?
I think so. I don't even remember.
Oh, fair horn. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful day. Alana, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.